I am Rachel Humphrey on behalf of DEI Advisors. And as part of our series on empowering personal success, we encourage everyone to go out and find champions. And I am really excited today to have the opportunity to interview one of my champions, Chip Rogers, President and CEO of AHLA. Chip, for those who are familiar or unfamiliar with my path, know that you gave me my first opportunity, took a chance on a retired trial lawyer in the corporate world, and then also an opportunity to promote me both to the C-suite and then later to recommend me as the interim president and CEO of AHLA when you moved on organization. So this is both an opportunity to say thank you to you publicly, but also to share really your leadership style and skills for others looking to advance their careers in the way that you have championed mine.
Well, let's be clear with the audience to start with. Everything that you got, you earned 1,000 times over. And in some of those cases that you just cited, I had to beg you to take those opportunities. It wasn't the other way around. And so I could never explain to those who are watching this the impact that Rachel has had in the times that we've worked together. And Rachel, your dedication and work effort is almost unmatched anywhere. So everything that you've accomplished, I was just happy to be there at the time you accomplished it. And it certainly wasn't me giving you those opportunities. You earned them, you took them, and you owned them. And I was just the benefactor of that.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Let's get started with your journey to leadership, a bit different than perhaps some of the others that we've interviewed, from entrepreneur to senator to association executive. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Wow. First, I think I came from a good family. And it had a lot of brothers and sisters. I had parents who taught me early on that things weren't just going to be handed to you, that if you wanted to win at anything, you were going to have to try really hard. And so, as a kid growing up, I was extremely involved in sports. To this day, anybody knows me knows what an average sports fan I am. And I think it just started with a kind of an understanding of, I like to compete. I want to work hard. I really dive into things, but that also has led me to, as you pointed out, a number of different careers, because I have felt at times that once I've mastered something, that I'm ready to move on to something else. And that has taken me from, all sorts of different entrepreneurial businesses that I ran and things I started, to the world of politics, to now what I'm doing. And so it's been an interesting journey. I have been helped by a lot of people along the way. I guess like most people, you enjoy most of what you do or you wouldn't be doing it. But most especially, I love what I'm doing now. I think back to my time in elected office, and there were parts of that were gratifying in a way that could never be fulfilled in any other endeavor that you get into. But politics is also a very dirty business, and after a while, it just wears on you. Meanwhile, since I've been in hospitality, just the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs and people that generally enjoy what they do each and every day, it kind of lifts you up. And so this is one where I think I'm going to stick for a while. I really do enjoy it.
That's great. I know that's actually a perfect segue. Normally, when we talk about work-life balance or work-life management, we're talking about women. But as you said, you were raised in a family to have a strong work ethic. Those of us who know you well know that you are a road warrior by choice and by love, that you work extremely hard, that you are very dedicated to your teams, your stakeholders, but you are also a dedicated father of 4, a spouse, a son, a sibling. How have you learned over the years to really manage those two interwoven relationships?
I don't, Rachel, I don't know that I do it that well. I mean, I try the best I can, but it is not easy. And especially when you look at a career kind of through the lens that I do, I mean, I'm all in, but I'm all in on all those things you mentioned. And so it's incredibly difficult to compartmentalize and say, this is work, this is family, this is something, these are hobbies and interests. They begin to become interwoven. Which can sometimes be good and sometimes be bad, because you do have some challenges there with boundaries. And I've been bad about that in my life, about letting some of those things leak into each other. And so But I think the key thread amongst all of them is that you have to love each and every one of them. You obviously love your family. There's no question about it. You love your hobbies or they wouldn't be your hobbies. But you also got to love your career and what it is you're doing. And how do you balance those three interests has always been a challenge. I've been fortunate enough to be in positions where for most of my career, I've been able to set my own schedule. And that has allowed me to find the quality time at unusual times that allows me to balance all those three things. And so I think about back in my days, in my political days, I would oftentimes be able to take my kids to go watch sporting events, which for me kind of doubled up as a political event, but I was able to kind of weave it all together. And so you just find those opportunities to really create that quality time. I think one of the things that I had to get past early on is partitioning my life in a way that was based only on hours, because I don't think you're ever going to be successful if you say, I'm going to spend this many hours doing this many hours doing this, and this many hours doing this. I think you have to say to yourself, I'm going to do this and accomplish this, whether that's work related or family related or hobby related. And then when you accomplish it, you balance with the other things that you need to accomplish. And so that doesn't always fit neatly into a 30-minute or 2-hour time frame. But I think you can eventually find that balance.
I like the idea too of crafting it in a way that works for you. The strategy that you have may be very different from mine. And if we can really focus on what works best for us, for our family, for our jobs, for our hobbies, then we're going to master it eventually, or do the best we can every day. As I like to say, maybe not doing it perfectly any day. One of the ways that you manage the work side of it, of course, is building a great team around you. And I can speak from personal experience that you do a great job both in identifying talent and then creating a sense of team when you have that. What do you look for when you're hiring? What are some of the attributes of new hires, regardless of role, that you're always looking for?
Boy, there's a lot there. Before I answer that question, you said something else that struck me on the last one I wanted to mention. That, and you know this, Rachel, because we've worked together for so long. You also have to be self-aware when you're in these positions of what you're good at, what you're not good at, when you're good at it, when you're not good at it. And you will know, again, from the days we work together, I don't want people scheduling me interviews at 8 a.m. That's not going to work for me. That's just not, that doesn't fit with me. But if you want to schedule it at 10 p.m., I'm perfectly fine with that, right? And I think over time, you have to be aware of where you do well and build your life around those times. Now, getting back to building a team, I think one of the great benefits I had is coming out of a life where at a very early age and all the way through my life being actively engaged in sports, even up until a couple of years ago when I was still coaching really high-level travel basketball, you begin to recognize that teams are successful when you put talented people together who understand the purpose and they don't quibble about whose job it is to accomplish the goal that they all see. And I think where people get into challenges, where teams falter, is where silos are created, which then breaks down communication and people begin to own only their part of the effort as opposed to saying, wait a minute, we're all in this together. We all understand this is the goal. How do we all get there? And if you have talented people that are bought in, as a leader, you then say, all right, let's step back and get out of the way. I'm going to put this in basketball terms because I love sports analogies. But if you have 5 guys on the court and typically the center or your power forward or somebody tall would be more apt to get a rebound and your point guard would not. But if the ball falls near the point guard and he looks at it and says, well, that's not my job to rebound. My job is to get assists. That kid's not going to be on the floor. You're going to pull off the floor and say, no, we all do what's necessary for the team to be successful. And so I think going back again to a sports analogy in my coaching days, I'll never forget after coaching this group of kids for many, many years, we played a game and it was a brilliant game and my team won by a lot. And the referee came up to me and said, man, your team is so well coached. And I looked at him and I said, you'd be surprised. I didn't call a single play this game. Not one time did I even call a play because the players knew what it was they needed to do. They were all bought in and they understand how the system worked. And I just basically had to roll the ball out and say, let's go, guys. And I think that's the kind of the concept that I look for in building a team is like, look, if you're willing to work hard and you're talented and you get what we're trying to do, I don't really need to coach you that much. I just need to put you in the opportunity for you to take advantage of your skill set. And when you do that, some pretty magical things can happen. Now, as you know, Rachel, sometimes people like yourself, like me, you tend to go overboard. You work too hard. You put too much in because you're so bought in, and you have to worry a little bit about burnout. You have to worry about what we talked about earlier, that life work balance. But just the idea of having talented people who you trust can reach the goal is the key to having a successful team. And in that interview process, you really got to drill down on that. You got to find out, well, how do you work in a team setting? What do you think is off limits? How do you build and support the people around you? How do you communicate with the people around you about things that don't necessarily fit into your job description? And when you can find those people that are able to do those things, as I mentioned a moment ago, it becomes pretty magical.
That's amazing too, because those are hard traits to anybody can say, I'm a team player, or I work hard, or I'm committed to the cause, but actually being able to recognize, whether it be in that interview process or through recommendations, referrals, to really identify those people. Moving on to, you talked about overcoming obstacles and overcoming challenges a minute ago, but in a different context. Every leader who has reached any level of success has had to learn how to overcome obstacles in their time. What is your approach to tackling challenges? What strategies do you implement? And has that changed over the course of your career or your careers?
Oh, yeah, it is definitely. I think early on, because competitive people are oftentimes self-motivated, they're somewhat individualistic at times, and they believe that no matter what the challenge in front of them, they can handle it themselves. That's not a bad trait, but it can't lead to the ultimate success you're going to need if you're leading other people. And so over time, you begin to recognize, hey, I don't necessarily know that topic, understand that topic, but I know there are people out there, and how do I bring them in? And especially if they're joining you in the effort, communicate to them what the goal is, and then let their expertise take over from that. And so I think that has been probably, as I've matured as both a leader and just as a person, you start to recognize, okay, what are my limitations? How am I balancing this? Because I can't do it all myself. And how do I bring in the people that are the best to do this and have them buy into the vision, the common vision that we have? That takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes time. And it took me a lot of time to finally get to that point. I think probably the best experience I had that taught me that in the most efficient manner was being in elected office, where you frankly have people from every walk of life asking and wanting things from you that are a cross section of everything, from social issues to fiscal issues to budgetary, everything, right? And at some point, you have to find those people around you that are truly experts in those areas and begin to rely on them. And that helped me immensely. And I think I learned a lot from that, and took that into my next roles of getting people who are really good and saying, this is what you do best. I don't really know that much about it, but I know you do. I'm giving you this. Now let's run with it.
I think that's one of the hardest things for leaders to do, is to say out loud, that is not my area of expertise. Either I can figure it out, or I can find someone who knows it, because in our eyes, we want to be able to accomplish anything that anyone asks. In talking about overcoming obstacles, there is certainly one that anyone in the hospitality industry, anyone living over the last 3 years, would certainly say is maybe one of the biggest obstacles they've ever faced in their lives, and that was the pandemic. Let's apply leadership skills to the pandemic. No playbook, no mentors to go to ask them how they did it before. Which of your leadership skills or the different personality traits do you have that you think really you were able to lean in on during the pandemic? You were fairly new to AHLA at the time, to really allow AHLA not just to survive, but to thrive at the time that its members really needed it most.
The obvious answer would be communication. I've obviously done this type of stuff for a long time. And during the pandemic, I was called on to really be that face and voice of the industry. But I'll set that aside, because I think more importantly, during the pandemic, what I learned early on as a young person, again, involved in sports, is that victory usually happens when you are steady and relentless. And I would hope that those would be my character traits that people would look back on during this time and say, that was really helpful. when I say relentless, one of the things I did in an earlier life, I was a competitive runner, and I found out late in high school that I was actually really talented at running cross country. But when you're out there running, it is such a mental game, because you get to mile 2 of a 3.12 mile 5K race, and you start to feel tired, and then you start telling yourself, all right, just one more step. Or you look ahead and you say, okay, if I can make it to that point right there, I'm good to go. And you keep setting those repetitive goals in front of you, and you just become relentless at attacking those goals again and again and again and again. And it doesn't really enter your mind to stop. It doesn't enter your mind that, wait, what if this doesn't work out? It's always, okay, I see the next goal in front of me, I'm going to hit that one. And when you hit that one, you're like, okay, I see the next one in front of you. And you build that mindset, because as you know, running and competitive running is such a mental game as it is a physical game. And so during the pandemic, when everything seemed so bleak, I'm like, okay, let's make it to next week. And then let's make it to the week after that. And as we kept doing that, and then finally we started seeing signs of relief, and we started seeing people starting to travel again, then it made it easy after that. But in that first 12 months, it was just that relentless, steady, day after day after day, pounding away, that I think helped set our industry apart from many others.
You might not get tired until mile 2. At mailbox 1, I'm wondering how many more mailboxes I have to run before I can be done. So maybe that is a difference between us. Because I have been on a lot of panels that you have moderated, that one of my favorite questions is, what advice would you give to your younger self? And I like it so much because I do think that our growth as leaders, as humans, involves a lot of reflection. And I'm curious, you've touched on some of them today, some things maybe that you do better today than earlier in your career. But looking back on your Georgia Tech graduating self, what would you tell yourself today?
I know it's simple, it's often repeated, but boy, as you get older and arguably wiser, you do look back and say, why did I care about this little detail or that little detail? Just always keeping in mind a much larger picture and how you're going to get there, and not get bogged down by the things that ultimately become meaningless. It is so important. And, I know it's an often overused phrase, but loving what you do, that is important. I mean, if you're going to be all in and be successful, and always keep in mind, this is the goal that we're all shooting for, then you better really believe in that goal. It can't be something that was given to you and someone just says, well, go do this, because you're going to burn out if you're not all in. And so I hear about burnout a lot of times, and people ask me, how do you not get burned out? And I just never think of it. It doesn't occur to me, because I'm thinking, okay, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm just after that. And so I think, looking back in life, if I were to go back to that, 22-year-old kid that was graduating from Georgia Tech, I would just say, look, don't get all caught up in the small details. Don't get all worried about what's exactly happening today. Keep your eye on a much larger picture moving forward. And if I'd have done that, I don't know what else would happen in my life. I'm very happy and satisfied, but I would have certainly have felt that I was being more effective by not getting bogged down in things that didn't matter.
I think you touched on an interesting point too, though, of loving what you do, because like you have had several different careers, and for some period of time loved what you were doing, but also the self-awareness to say, maybe I don't have that piece anymore, and now it's time to transition and find something new that I love to do. And so I think that advice, to be able to go back and say, you don't have to love what you're doing forever, that you have the ability to switch gears when that no longer applies.
I got a great story for that. So the first time I ever ran for public office, I walked out my door, and I lived in a very large neighborhood. We had 1,300 homes. And I said to myself, I'm going to knock on every single one of these doors, which at the time was probably a foolish thing to do, but I was just going to challenge myself. But I also walked out before I knocked on that first door and said, I am going to fight to accomplish this, get into elected office. And I'm going to do this into the point where I don't want to do it anymore, or I don't have the fire in me anymore. And I can pinpoint the exact place and time where, after a decade of being highly involved in elected office, where it dawned on me, and I said to myself, I don't love it anymore. I don't have the fire inside of me. I represent other people, and they deserve to have somebody else represent them that has the fire in them. And I had actually just won re-election to my 6th term in office. I just won when I decided to retire. And people said, all right, there's got to be something else there. No one just walks away like that. And I kept telling everybody, look, it's just, I did it as hard as I could and as well as I could for as long as I could. And I woke up and recognized I don't love this anymore. And I had told myself and promised myself that I would walk away when that happened. And I'll also never forget that I had the strangest thing when you're elected office, you have lobbyists who would buy you dinners and lunches all the time. And I arranged for this really large lunch, like 200 people, and invited all the lobbyists there. And no one knew why. They're like, why is he doing this? And they're like, he's making some big announcement. He's going to run for another office or whatever. And I said, I wanted you all to know that I'm leaving office because I've lost the fire in me, and I pledged myself I wouldn't do that any longer. But I also wanted to say thank you to all of you who have been so kind to me for all the years. And so I'm buying all of you lunch today. It was a very expensive proposition. And so many of them came up and said, no elected officials ever bought me a lunch. And they just couldn't believe that I'd kind of turned the tables there. But I walked away with total peace that I'd made the right decision. And not a single time since then have I looked back and said, I wish I'd have done it another way, because I committed to myself that once I reached that point that I was going to walk away, and I did, and it felt good. And I was completely satisfied with it.
Well, I think that's an incredible lesson to learn as well, but also to share. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery. I don't know if you knew at the time what was going to be coming next, but having the confidence that there was something out there that would fill that space, other than just the family and the hobbies that you talked about earlier, knowing how much you love to work, knowing how much value you derive from that. So that's incredible. The hospitality industry is incredibly special from a relationship building standpoint. I've never been a part of anything that feels like such a community as this industry. What are everybody's going to network differently. Everyone's going to build relationships differently. You and I have very similar networks, but we've built them in very different strategies. Which of your personality traits, or how have you networked or built relationships, especially in hospitality, that are really situated or suited toward your personality?
I've always felt that if you're going to build a real relationship with somebody, then you need to start that by connecting with them and what they're interested in. We can all have these business relationships where we go to the conferences and the only topic of discussion is the business that we share. But people are much deeper than that. And so I've always tried to find out, well, what interests you beyond just the hotel industry or just what your job is? And I think when you dig a little deeper and find those things and connect on a very real personal level, you build long-lasting relationships that are so much different than just what at times can be kind of surface level only business relationships. And you and I know that, Rachel, because we know each other so well. But it's interesting because when we have conversations, rarely are they about business, right? They're about you or me or our families or what's going on. And when you have those type of relationships, they become long-lasting, they become more meaningful. And those are also the people that you want to be around, right? And so I think that's critical as well. And so my approach has always been, yes, we share a common interest in the hotel industry or the hospitality industry or the political industry. But what really are you interested in? What matters to you? And I think if we search that out, you find that the relationship can be built, frankly, much quicker, but much deeper.
How do you remember? Is it through the genuine nature of the curiosity of the learning from that person? Like you and I may root for different NFL teams and do root for different NFL teams, but we both know that on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, we're going to be talking about what's happening in the football game. How do you remember, retain, develop that for the next time you see someone? Because you obviously are coming in contact with thousands of people in any given year.
Yeah, I think the challenge, what would hinder you from doing that is if you only honed in on a single thing that you think everybody has in common. And it sounds a little strange, but if you're focusing on something unique for that particular person, that uniqueness gets attached to that particular person. And then frankly, it's easy to remember that way. If I ask everybody, who's your favorite NFL team? At some point, I would just lose track of who is who because there are only so many teams and there's so many people, right? So I try to hone in on the uniqueness of something that is individual to that particular person. That just makes it much easier for me to remember. But it can be challenging at times. I do know that your favorite NFL team has won the most Super Bowls. My favorite NFL team is the only team that has ever had a perfect season. We'll leave it at that.
And we'll let people figure out who those two teams are. They say it's important nowadays that each individual has a personal brand. You've talked a little bit about some of the things that you think that you're known for now, but if you were to have a personal brand statement or to walk away saying, this is what I hope people think of when they think of Chip Rogers, what would it be?
That guy really cares about what he's doing and the people that are around him. I mean, that's what I hope to leave with. It's interesting when I think we all, as we grow older, begin to see our parents in a different light. And we know our parents for what they are at the time we grow up. But then sometimes later in life, we see them in a professional setting that can change your mind or enhance what you think they are. And the reason I'm telling you this story is I remember seeing my dad, who also worked very, very, very hard. And I remember going to, once I got involved in the political world, I started meeting a lot of people who also knew him. And I'd seen what he had accomplished in his professional life through him being recognized for those accomplishments. But what was interesting is as I began in my professional life meeting people who knew him, their comments were not about, well, your dad's really good at this, or wow, it's amazing he accomplished this. It was constantly over and over again, he's just like the nicest guy. Your dad is so super nice. And I began to realize he built a brand and a personal reputation that went way beyond just professional excellence. It's a really good person. And I don't know, and I'm pretty sure I haven't even come close to measuring up to what he's been able to do. But I think if I was able to have that as the brand, people saying, that guy really cares about what he's doing and the people around him, I would be very satisfied with that. So it's a continuing journey to accomplish this, but it's something I remind myself of each and every day.
That's great. I know we are getting close on time. I actually have two more for you. There's obviously a lot of discussion right now about efforts in the hospitality industry to build a more diverse industry at the leadership level. What do you see the situation right now, and how can we make improvements in that area, not just within our own organizations, but across the industry as well?
Rachel, because you've been with me and you know how I've built the teams that I've built around me. I've never understood, I just can't comprehend why you wouldn't embrace as broad a diversity as you possibly can. And I go back to the sports analogy world. If I'm building a team, then I want the opportunity, I want the landscape of who I get to choose to be on my team to be as broad, as wide, and as diverse as possible, because that allows me to build a better team. That team's always going to be more successful. If you tell me I can build a team that are only comprised of these type of people, well, you've just limited the options I have to choose from. But if you tell me I can build a team from anybody, then what I'm going to do is go out and search the very best people that can be part of my team and not worry about pigeonholing them into any certain type of characteristics. If you're good, I don't care what your background is. I want you on the team. And so that's where I look at diversity. And it's always just, I've never understood people that wouldn't want to embrace diversity, because it by definition is going to lead to better performance in the long run. And so if you're good at what you do, I want you on the team. It's just the bottom line. And those things that I might look at you and make a predetermination on are foolish. Like, I should never take a person and say, I believe you fit into this role or this hole or this job until I know who you are as an individual. And every individual is 100% unique. There's not two single people on earth that are the same. And if I'm willing to take the time to find out who you are as an individual and you fit what we need as a team, I want you on the team. And so limiting the number of people that I can pull from is just foolish.
It's interesting because that ties back to the very beginning when we started talking earlier, when you said truthfully, that you had to often spend more than one conversation or more than 1 month or two in trying to talk me into considering new opportunities when we worked together. You were looking at me as a person and what I was capable of doing in a way that I wasn't even looking at myself as a person and capable of doing. So maybe that's what we need, is more leadership looking at the individual person and what they're capable of. I had not actually thought of that until you just described it in that way. We are, in fact, running out of time. So I want to focus on the mission statement of DEI Advisors, which is to empower personal success. And just ask you to share, what would be your one tidbit of final advice to our listeners?
It's something I mentioned earlier. You're only going to be successful in the long run at those things that you really love. Now, you can be talented, but if you think about, and I feel like a broken record here, think about the great sports figures that we have. So I'm going to use Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, and Nick Saban. Those are three people that are not only incredibly talented, but they love what they do. They thrive on the competition, and they're willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And so when you see the best of the best in society, and it can be any walk of life, I just use sports because most people can more easily relate to that. And you like Michael Jordan's preparation, drive, and intensity was legendary. But you can have all three of those things, and if you don't have talent, you can't make it to the very top. Nick Saban, same thing. He's the greatest recruiter in the history of college football. He has built the greatest system in the history of college football. And while he may not be the best on-the-field coach ever, he's one of the best. And you mix all three of those things together, and he's had unparalleled success. And then you look at a guy like Tom Brady, and you look at his personal discipline that he's layered on top of that talent and that drive, and he's done things that no one has ever done. And so when you think about personal success, you obviously have to be good at something and disciplined at something, but you also got to love it, because just the discipline and the hard work can only take you so far.
That's great advice. Chip, thank you for your leadership in the industry, for championing my career and so many others. And thank you very much for supporting DEI Advisors, and look forward to catching up.
Thanks, Rachel.